And the Khilafah state submitted to Allah's authority. His authority was supreme. For Allah says, for example, in Surah An-Nisa, Atiyullah, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who have faith in Allah, Atiyullah, obey Allah. That's one. Wa atiyu Rasul, and obey the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Number two. Wa ulil amri minkum, and obey those in authority amongst you. Not, as my teacher points out, Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari rahimahullah, not authority which comes out of the barrel of a gun. No. It has to be lawfully constituted authority, which means authority constituted on the basis of Allah's law. Then you have an obligation to obey that authority. And so the Khilafah state recognized Allah's supreme authority, and then after him the authority of the Prophet ﷺ, and after him the authority of the state. And this could not be inconsistent with that and with that. The Khilafah state also recognized the unity of the Ummah and preserved the unity of the Ummah. How did it do so? It recognized all territory under the control of the Amir al-Mu'mineen to be something called Darul Islam. Never heard of it before? Darul Islam. This vocabulary has disappeared, and in its place you have popcorn. Yeah, this is the intellectual ignorance in which we now live today. And it is a function of Islamic scholarship to teach the people and bring them back to the truth. The Khilafah state recognized this territory to be Darul Islam. And once a territory is Darul Islam, every Muslim, including Nathan, who's come from San Francisco, every Muslim has the right to enter the territory of Darul Islam. You don't need a visa. Did you know that? Huh? You don't need a visa. All you need is La ilaha illallah, and you can enter the territory of Darul Islam. Well, why don't you try to go before some immigration officer? Pakistan, Islamic Republic of Pakistan, excuse me, and Islamic Iran. And when you reach the immigration officer, you say, La ilaha illallah. See whether you have right of entry. Every Muslim had the right to reside in the territory of Darul Islam. You don't need a residence permit. Every Muslim has the right to seek livelihood in Darul Islam. You don't need a work permit. And every Muslim has the right, who is sakin, not musafir, to participate in the political process, shura, on the basis of political equality with all other Muslims. You don't need something called citizenship. Whether they like it or they don't, it is absolutely irrelevant now that the sun is about to set. This is coming back to the world of Islam. So your Egyptian nationalism and your Pakistani nationalism and your so many other nationalisms will return to the garbage bin from where it emerged in the first place, and will be replaced with the fraternity of Islam, inshallah. They never left, they never decolonized until they had removed all obstacles in their way, in their pursuit of their ultimate goal of one world under their control and one world government with which they would rule the world. And that's why the Khilafah had to go and had to be replaced with something else. And in its place came the modern republican state, the modern secular republican state, with which you are all familiar. It broke up the world of Islam into bits and pieces. Like Pakistan today is not going to be the same tomorrow if they succeed. Maybe in another month or two the attack will come. Only Allah does not make mistakes, okay? But they want to attack Pakistan not only to destroy the nuclear plants and nuclear weapons, because Muslims are not supposed to have those kind of weapons. Only Israel, not Muslims. And since Pakistan does possess nuclear weapons and nuclear plants, that's why they have to invade it and destroy it. And they want to get a civil war going in Pakistan, so you can use that as an excuse. But when they're finished with that, and given the pathetic state of the leadership, not the men in the ranks of the armed forces, the leadership, they look to me like Zionists in Pakistan. And the political leadership as well. Not the people love Islam. It seems to me that this kind of pathetic leadership that Pakistan has had all these years makes it possible for them, the enemy, to succeed with their plans. But they want to do more than that. They want to break up Egypt into bits and pieces. Break up Pakistan into bits and pieces. Because it's easier then for India to establish its hegemony over the bits and pieces. They want to do the same thing with Egypt. Attack Egypt from this side, Israel. Attack Egypt from that side. Which side? There used to be a man in Libya who opposed the Zionists. I don't know if you remember him. And they took Muslims, and they deceived these Muslims, and they made an alliance with these Muslims, and these are the fellows who are now in charge. To make an alliance with NATO, Zionist NATO, to overthrow this leader and his government in Libya. So that Libya is now under NATO control. So when they're ready, NATO will attack Egypt from the west and break up Egypt into bits and pieces. The whole Arab world is going to be attacked like that. Why? Because they want to rule the world. And they decolonized after they had put in place the political institutions, the economic institutions like banking, the monetary institutions like the bogus and fraudulent and utterly haram paper currency that we now have, all of us. And only after they had put these in place did they decolonize with the certainty now that they can continue to rule by proxy. P-R-O-X-Y. Come on, give me the Bahasa word for proxy. He's searching in his pocket now. Proxy. Huh? By proxy. Wakil. Wakil. Okay. By proxy. In consequence of their success in replacing the Khilafah with the modern republican secular state, Dajjal brought into the world a new world order. How did Islamic scholarship respond? We don't have time tonight to look at the economic response. We don't have time tonight to look at the monetary response. We don't have time tonight to look at the educational response, the institutions of educational studies. We're talking about the political response in terms of political philosophy. The most significant response that came out of the world of Islamic scholarship came from India. An Indian scholar named Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, a man of eminent scholarship. I consider him to be my teacher, although I never met him. I was born many years after his death. Dr. Iqbal is a towering scholar of Islam, worthy of profound respect. And he took on Western scholarship. That scientific method that we spoke about earlier, that if it did not come from observation and from scientific experimentation, it's not knowledge. It belongs to a place in Orlando called Disneyland. He took on this Western, I'm going to use a big word now, he challenged this Western epistemology, or the branch of knowledge which studies knowledge. He challenged it in a profound response, the best that was ever penned by any scholar of Islam. In the first 2 chapters of his book entitled The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, but I suggest that you go to the pharmacy and buy a bottle of Tylenol tablets if you want to read that book. It's not easy. As a master's degree student in philosophy, I had to study that book. I read it 20 times without understanding it. And only when I studied Surah Al-Kahf of the Quran, only then was I able to understand those first 2 chapters of Iqbal. So the world of Islam has a tremendous depth of gratitude to Dr. Muhammad Iqbal. Remember the book, The Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam? You don't have to go and buy the book, just go to the internet and type in Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, and you'll get the 9 chapters of the book there and read the first 2. But in that same book, Dr. Iqbal made a monumental mistake. And it is no disrespect whatsoever to point out a mistake made by a scholar. It does not diminish our admiration of his scholarship. Everybody can make mistakes. And I certainly do not want students who will accept everything that I say uncritically. No, those are dangerous students. I much prefer to have students who will never accept anything that I say until you first studied it carefully. And only when you are convinced that it is the truth, only then do you understand it, you accept it. And if you're not convinced, don't accept it. Iqbal declared, while commenting on the events in Turkey, the collapse of the Ottoman Islamic Empire and its replacement in 1924 with the secular state of Turkey, he commented on what he calls the admirable Turkish ijtihad, that the Republican state can function as a substitute for the Khilafah. He never made a bigger mistake in his whole life. And because of that mistake that Iqbal made, so many have since then been misguided in accepting the modern secular state and accepting the system of elections of the modern secular state to form a government that will preside over the shirk. We now have even Islamic parties. I gather you have one right here in Malaysia. And you have them in Tunisia. You have them in Egypt. You have them, the most famous one of all, of course, is in Turkey. And these Islamic parties believe that you can register the Islamic movement as a political party under the constitution of the secular state, and then fight in elections like everybody else fight in elections. And if you win the elections and you take power, then you have a gradual movement, you know. You allow the alcohol for some time and allow the nightclubs and so on for some time, because you don't want to rock the boat, do you? Until eventually, incrementally, you'll be able to somehow, with a philosophy called abracadabra, bring Islam. Where is Islamic scholarship today? Is this the Sunnah? That you walk the road of shirk to bring Islam? Mine has been a voice crying in the wilderness for a long, long time. For a long, long time I was saying the US dollar is going to collapse. And they laughed at me. I gather they're not laughing at me anymore now. No. For a long, long time, since this book appeared, I told them Israel wants to rule the world. And Israel wants to replace the United States as the next ruling state in the world. And they laughed at me. Well, when Israel attacks Iran, let's see who's going to laugh. The Western world, with the mastermind being Dajjal, they needed an international organization that will bring all these secular states, all these republican states under one umbrella. And once you embrace them under one umbrella, you are able to now control them all. And you are on your way to world government, one world government. They started the process with something called the League of Nations, which had its headquarters in Geneva, the city where I studied international relations, Geneva. But then the League of Nations collapsed because the United States refused to enter the League of Nations. And then came the Second World War. And when the Second World War was concluding, they gathered the victors in San Francisco, was it San Francisco? To establish the United Nations organization. This was 1944, I believe.